Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Oh, I love our corporate-controlled mainstream media, leading off with the, most Democrats want someone other than Biden to run. You go, no. This is where you got to stop this. And Democrats, if that's true, stop it. Stop it. The majority of Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents want the party to replace Joe Biden in 2024. I don't care if you replace him or not. Just keep the policies. Keep the direction we're going. Stop with the nonsense. Stop with this. Stop it. And I'll tell you, the approval ratings highest it's been, highest point this year, which means people are, I think, coming around to the reality, moving in the right direction. Today, the president was talking about, hey, how are we going to help middle class folks? And the important line for me anyway, I know everyone was on the, capitalism without competition isn't capitalism, it's exploitation, that line. Good line, true, good line. But the most important line in there is, my focus is on working class and middle class folks. They're the ones who get hurt the most. There is a guy sitting in the White House who gives a rat's behind about Joe Sixpack, who cares about the ham and eggers, the people who show up, punch the clock, do the work, that nobody remembers their name. There's a guy sitting in the White House who cares about those people, even if they don't care about him. This is the monumental moment where we got to wake up. Wake up, because we're at a very important moment in history. Very important moment. This is a crossroads moment. Because what Biden is doing is moving us off what has been built over the last 40 years. The whole supply side voodoo Reaganomics, all the neoliberalism, moving it now slowly, but moving us away from that and moving us back in a direction that helped build the most prosperous working class in history, helping to reshore manufacturing, helping to invest in the future of this country, and helping working people to share in it. I've been having tons of conversations with people here over the last several days as we plan for our Working Class Heroes Tour. And I keep coming back to this conversation with people about, the golden age of the working class for America, the golden age of of America. What people think back to as, when the country was great. And they always come back to that post-World War II era, my grandparents' generation. That greatest generation that fought the war, came home and fought the boss, and built the most prosperous working class in history, in the history of civilization, not just our country, in the history of civilization, where workers had a fair shot, shared in the wealth that their labor created. And how did they do it? Well, they did it through extraordinarily strong unions, which meant working people were standing together, not eating each other. And they did it through voting for people who invested in them and their communities. The reason the 50s and 60s were so great, if you will, is because we had incredible investment from government, smart investment, roads and bridges and healthcare and education and things to make us better. And how do we pay for it? Well, we paid for it by taxing the hell out of rich people. And when I tell folks, you go, well, we're taxed enough already now. No, we're not. Or at least our rich people aren't. But you go back to that era where we think of as the great era, the Leave It to Beaver, Mayberry kind of Norman Rockwell era. Tax rates on the very wealthy were through the roof. And we need to go back to that. We need to return to that era. In fact, the top marginal tax rate in 1953 was 92%. Corporate tax rates were 56%. We use that money to invest in the future. It was a three-legged stool. High taxes on the very wealthy, redistributed into investments in our future, in our country, in our infrastructure and education and healthcare, and strong unions to demand a share of the profits that their labor created. And over these last 40, 50 years, those three legs, well, they've been whittled down to barely pencils. And the sad reality is we've been sold this false bill of goods for so long that, we could all be, pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and we're all going to be self-made millionaires, when the reality is most working people are just getting the short end of the stick. So when Biden says capitalism without competition isn't capitalism, it's exploitation, he's right. It is. And thank goodness there's someone in the White House who gives a tinker's damn about the average working person. Now, the event today, talking about, hey, how are we going to crack down on all of the fees and all of the, how are we going to crack down on how the economy has Mitt Romneyed us to death? Mitt Romney was governor of Massachusetts, ran around for a long time saying, I never raised taxes, but raised fees on working people more than 500 times. So every time you went to get a driver's license, a fishing license, a hunting license, a license for this, for that, whatever, you got taxed. You did, the working people. People like him, they walked away scot-free. So what Biden is doing is saying, look, all these nickel and dime fees you get with airlines or banks or any of this stuff, it's time there's some transparency. It's time we start bringing this stuff out into the light. And what they pointed out is, and this is just a mind-blowing number, just baggage fees alone last year, just you needing to get your luggage from one place to the other, the airline industry made $5.3 billion. Just that. They made $700 million in cancellation and changes. $700 million bucks. Because it's amazing. It's amazing how in the real small print, way down at the bottom, and in print that you need a magnifying glass to read, they put all the details. Now, of course, the lobby group for the airline industry says, well, we're doing the transparency. It's the taxes. Because again, you got to get people foaming at the mouth over taxes. Because taxes, that's the problem. Again, distraction. Now, the Biden event today, again, talking about how are we going to help working class people. Did we have that in the last administration? Yeah, we had a lot of talk, not much in the way of action. And this is why I'm thrilled to have Biden in the White House right now. And I've said it a bunch of times. Wasn't my first choice. Was not. But doing the work. In fact, he's also come out and said that they're moving towards having the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, requiring internet service providers. Have you looked at your internet bill? Lots of charges. You go, what's that? Well, it's time we bring that stuff out into the light. Also, there's going to be some money to help, some grants to help small meat processors to enter into producing our nation's meat supply. And you go, there are 4 companies that control like 90%. And this is where, again, competition matters. And this is where conservatives, my conservative friends, remember when you used to believe in competition? Remember that? Come on, come back with me in the way back machine. Come on. You used to believe in that. You used to preach about competition, how we needed that in the economy and it was good for us. Only now you're kind of the monopolistic folks. Because you're on the team. You bought the hat, you got the shirt. Maybe we start thinking a little bit differently, especially those of us in the working class. When you start looking at the numbers, I think kind of important. I was looking at some Federal Reserve numbers because I want to talk a little bit about the Federal Reserve. And we're at an interesting point because we got a Federal Reserve that wants to slam on the brakes because rich people, they're afraid of you and me. They're afraid of working class people having a little bit of security, a little bit of wealth. And I came across this graph that they had in the One Fed report that shows that the bottom 50% of us, real net household wealth is at an all-time record high. Bottom 50% of us average about $67,000 in wealth. That is, well above the $8,000 it was back in 2011, and has skyrocketed during the Biden years. In fact, has gone up 60% since the beginning of Biden's term, which means that the policies that they're moving on, the things that they're doing to help working class people is what? It's working. It's working. Which is why last week we were talking about, the Fed, Jerome Powell, basically slamming on the brakes, and what we know is coming is a massive recession. And they're honest about this. He did an interview not too long ago, and one of the people asked the question, how long is it going to take? How much economic pain should we prepare for? And the chairman said, how long? Well, he said, it really depends on how long it takes for wages, and more than that, prices to come down, for inflation to come down. He's basically saying, well, we've got to depress your wages. We've got to make you work for less, which means we've got to crush those unions, which means we've got to crush worker power, and we've got to make people desperate again. This is what he's saying. This other guy, Michael McKay, asks if 1.3 million jobs being lost, if that's acceptable. And Powell's response is, we're never going to say that it's too many people working, but the real point is that inflation. What we hear from people when we meet them is that they're really suffering from inflation. And if we want to set ourselves up really light the other period of a very strong labor market, we have got to get inflation behind us. He says, I wish there were a painless way to do that. There isn't. So what we need to do, get rates up to the point where we're putting meaningful downward pressure on inflation. And that's what we're doing. And what is inflation? That's you. That's wages. Meaningful pressure downward on your wages. And this is where you go, corporate profits are really high. We've got a wealth class that's doing really well. How come we don't hear the Fed asking them to help? And I go back to what Biden said at the beginning. I go back to that in the minute. His focus is on working class people, on the middle class, on the people who get up every day and punch a clock and go to work and support their families, because they're the ones who get hurt the most. That is a refreshing departure from the reality of virtually every working day of my life. As we have been under this neoliberal kind of push of using the Fed to, cause inflation when working people do a little bit better. You look at the reality. The reality is policies are working, making lives better. Wealth class can't have that. They want people desperate, pliable, working, happy to have jobs, just happy to have those crummy jobs. Powerless. Question is that what you want? And this election is about, do we continue on a course that's moving us in a positive direction? Or, do we give in and go back to the neoliberal supply side voodoo Reaganomic, give the rich people everything they want in the hope that their pocket's full and we get to scurry and fight over the crumbs? That's the question. So we can play the red hat, blue hat game. We can fight over who's wearing which t-shirt, or we can look upward and go, yeah, it's those corporate boardrooms. That's where we should be putting our effort. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So something really kind of cool happened today. And look, I'm not a big science nerd, but I kind of was, science fiction stuff growing up as a kid, space stuff, Ray Bradbury, Omni magazine, kind of cool potential of where we go. Today, the DART mission, they basically shot what was, I don't know, like a vending machine into space, and they hit this asteroid, which evidently is about the size of like a football field, I guess, traveling at 4 miles a second, thousands of miles away. They literally hurled a vending machine at this thing. I mean, the math in this is just incredible. The technology, just incredible. And my first thought was, I wonder how many charter school graduates were on that team. How many for-profit, paper mill college graduates were on that team that were able to pull this off. And then my second thought was, wow, we can hit an asteroid moving at like 4 miles a second, thousands of miles above the Earth. We can hurl a vending machine at it and hit it dead smack in the middle. But we can't solve the problems that we have in front of us that should be very, very simple. We can't end childhood hunger. We can't give veterans a place to live. We can't solve those things. We can't create good jobs for working people. We can't rebuild our infrastructure, but we can do that. We have the intelligence, the ability to cooperate. Just incredible. And look, the reality is because the system is set up to keep us pitted against each other. And I saw the headlines today that there's a headline over at the New York Times. Republicans intensify attacks on crime, as Democrats push back. And again, we're fighting over like right on cue, because Republicans don't really have any solutions to our real problems. So we got to point out things. Immigration and crime. It's election time. Trot out the tried and tested true fear-mongering tactics. And like I said, right on cue. So am I surprised? No. And ultimately, who gets rich off of this? Well, Comcast, the big moneyed media companies. In fact, the other story that I came across in this election cycle, campaigns have spent more than $6.4 billion on ads, TV, radio, digital. Do you think we could spend that money just, I don't know, a little bit better, a little bit smarter, help us move in a direction that, I don't know, we're actually investing in the future, helping create the jobs that we need, just kind of throwing that out there as a thought. Just kind of a thought. Let's quick go to the phones. We got Alice on one. Alice, how are we doing today?
Oh, we're doing okay. The Republicans really don't want to solve anything. They just want to be the morality police. It's much more fun that way, telling people how to live and what to do and blaming everything on the Democrats.
Well, that's the game, because when you don't have a plan, you've got to point out the deficiencies in others.
Exactly. Like I said, they're more concerned with oppressing us and making us all adopt their so-called superior morals. You know, I actually find fault with the idea that they have superior morals, because I really think that Charles Manson and his family had better morals than the Republicans and the evangelicals and the morality police.
Ouch. That's a statement.
I'm totally serious. So, yeah, you know, we're not going to solve anything as long as we have them pushing their, you know, oh no, we can't do this and that.
No, and this is where I think we're in a moment, and this election I think is really important, because I do see some good things coming out of this administration, and I do see this president as someone who cares about average, everyday working people, like no president in my lifetime. And look, you know, people can say what they want about Obama or Clinton or Carter, and these were not people who, in my view, who viewed working class people through the same lens that Biden does, especially on the policy front. So this is why I think, you know, in this moment, I think Biden is doing a great job.
I agree with you, and I agree with you in the fact that he seems to be more concerned about the working class people than, and like you, and I'm a few years older than you, he is more concerned more so than anyone that I've seen. But I guess we can just look forward to the morality police showing up. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Alice. Appreciate it. No, but this is basically the, you know, my main premise of the trip that we're about ready to embark upon. You know, going into places that, you know, we don't know what we're going to find, but talking about, you know, where do we want to get? Because I've said this before. I believe, and I've always believed, that working people want to get to the same place. And politically, we've always taken different paths and had different ideas. I've always believed that until recently. I have always believed that Republicans and Democrats all, you know, wanted the same destination. We wanted good schools and good safe neighborhoods and good jobs, and it was just a matter of, you know, how to get there. What path do you take to get there? I'm now increasingly not seeing and believing that to be the reality. I'm seeing, you know, people like the guy running for governor in my state who's talking about a complete transformation of everything that I believe that you know, our state and our country should be. A total fundamental shift of you know, virtually every aspect of our lives, and not wanting to get to the same kind of place. Fundamentally changing who and what we are as a country. And this is why I think this election is so important. And I think this administration is doing something that I think is worth noting. And it's undoing a lot of the powerful forces that, to be honest, have gotten just obscenely wealthy over the last 40 years. The ones who put Reagan into power, the ones who were able to just cash in off of, you know, broken unions and you know, horrible policy. Now's the time for us to hold on to that. Now's the time for us to push back. Now's the time to stand up and well, move in a better direction. At least that's my thought. I'd love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, some good news. New York Times had a story today that, you know, we're creating manufacturing jobs like it's the 70s. And, you know, that's a good thing. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day that became known as Bloody Thursday. 7 striking workers were shot dead and another 30 wounded at the Jacola Mill in Honapath, South Carolina. The Great Textile Strike of 1934 had started on September 1st. The 22-day strike spanned the eastern United States from New England to Georgia and involved close to 500,000 workers. The main issue was the dreaded stretch-out, increased workloads at the same or even reduced pay rates. Striking textile workers implemented the flying picket squad tactic employed by Minneapolis Teamsters earlier that summer. Hundreds drove from mill to prevent scabbing. Mill executives across the Piedmont were stunned and terrified at the strike's effectiveness and the workers' militancy. Strikers at the Chicola Mill had formed solid picket lines at the gate when scabs and special deputies, armed by the mill owners, opened fire. All 7 were shot in the back as they tried to escape the hail of bullets. According to a New York Times article the following day, the killings marked, quote, the beginning of the second bloody phase of the strike as one town after another reported completion of preparations to resist the flying squads and the picketing activity of the strikers. Frank Beecham, the grandson of Chicola Mill owner and mayor of Hona Path, Dan Beecham, has worked to unearth the history of the massacre and apologize for his grandfather's cruelty. He notes that, as in many southern mill towns, after the strike went down to defeat, those who struck were fired and blacklisted. Those who retained their jobs essentially took a vow of silence, never to discuss the strike or the massacre again.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Let me say one word to you, nuts. Now, let me say one name to you, Ted Cruz. They've become synonymous with the Texas lawmaker perennially topping national lists of goofy right-wing political goobers. Only, Ted can't rightly be called a lawmaker, for he's not a serious participant in that process, instead devoting his senatorship to political stunts and picking silly PR fights with a growing list of enemies. Running out of people to attack, Ted has found another for his vitriol, fictional icons. He's been padding his right-wing credentials by going after Mr. Potato Head, Mickey and Pluto, and, believe it or not, Muppets. This U.S. Senator has dedicated the power and public resources of his office to demonize popular creatures on Sesame Street, specifically Big Bird and lovable little Elmo. Ted rants he has proof that Muppets are covert tools of, quote, government propaganda. So this ridiculous excuse of a senator is saving America from Muppets. But for a whole bag of assorted nuttiness, you can't beat Senator Rick Scott's 11-point plan to rescue America. A disgraced former healthcare mogul, this mega-millionaire reinvented himself as a wingnut Florida senator, and he now chairs a policy arm of the Republican Party. In February, he set forth a stunning agenda of far-out right-wing extremism that he says his party will push if they retake the Senate this November, including 1. Implementing new federal taxes on the poorest half of Americans. 2. Terminating Social Security and Medicare. 3. Completing Donald Trump's folly of a border wall. This is Jim Hightower saying, fiddle-faddlers like Cruz and Scott have turned the once proud U.S. Senate into the little nut shop on the Hill.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, glaring New York Times headline, factory jobs are booming like it's the 1970s. And the reality is this, as I've been saying, we moved away from manufacturing, we moved away from investments because of policy. Bad policy got us to the place where we are right now. Smart policy, good policy can move us in the other direction. The one thing that the Republicans masterfully did is they got us working folk to look at our government with a jaundiced eye and to turn against our government. Government's bad. Well, you know what? Maybe we start thinking about government policy being something that helps us create jobs, create an economy that works for all of us. And here to share some thoughts on this most recent article and the direction of manufacturing, I've asked Mike Lux to come talk with us. Mike's the president of American Family Voices, their website, AmericanFamilyVoices.org. Mike, thanks for taking time for us.
I'm happy to come on, Rick. This is one of my favorite topics. This is such an important thing for America. I remember back in 2009 when the trade gaps were yawning and the financial crisis had hit, and Larry Summers, who was the chief economic advisor for Obama, was asked the question, well, what should Americans be selling to to other economies around the world. And he said, well, legal services, accounting services, that kind of thing. He didn't even think about manufacturing, right? And now we've actually got a president who gives a damn about manufacturing and wants to see us creating more jobs. And we have barely started, barely scratched the surface, but we're already seeing the results.
Yeah, I would argue it's not even just so much about manufacturing. It's about workers. It's about people that those union workers that, like he talks about all the time, that throughout his career have made it possible for him to rise. It's about the working people. The jobs are a big part of that, but it's about making lives better. At least that's my view on it.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I mean, manufacturing is a part of that. We need to start making stuff again, like they do in Germany, which is a very high wage, high unionized economy. So people talk about, manufacturing should be done by low wage countries. It's, the time of manufacturing in America is over. I don't know if I can swear on your show or not, but
don't.
But that ain't. I won't use the swear word, but that ain't true. You can have a high wage economy that still makes things. And you're absolutely right. We're talking about working people who make America go, make America run, like nurses and fast food workers and teachers and but also those factory workers and those construction workers.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we learned out of this pandemic, or at least I hope we learned, and I have been talking about all the years that I've been doing this program, domestic production, domestic consumption. In times of need, you produce what you need domestically. And you, in times of need, you ramp that production up. We didn't have that capacity because guess what? Our production was done overseas, and they were going, hey, ramp up production for us. And this is where I keep coming back to this. When things are good, it's okay. But in moments of crisis and moments of uneasiness, things get a little shaky. And I've always argued that manufacturing is a national security issue, especially when you're talking about high-tech things like chips and machined goods and all of that. And I think we've lost that thought process.
Well, we absolutely have. And it's nice to see an administration that is refocusing on that. I loved Bill Clinton. I worked for Bill Clinton. I loved Obama. I worked in the transition for Obama. But they never had kept the focus on manufacturing. They were more concerned with other things. When the trade deals were being negotiated, they were being negotiated over stuff like intellectual property rights for companies, rather than what is it going to do for working people. And I think now you've got Biden, who's really reorienting things. He's really thinking about how do we build more things in America? How do we bring jobs back to America? And it's been a real focus of his from the very beginning. The very first bill that he passed had Buy America provisions in it, the strongest Buy America provisions we'd seen in decades. And you're starting to see that, and it's going to take a while. I mean, we dug ourselves a hell of a deep hole.
Yep.
Right? I mean, for 40 years we've been digging a hole that workers keep getting thrown into, and so it's going to take a while to come back. But we're starting to see it. It's starting to happen, and we're also seeing, like worldwide, supply chains got so brittle, because these big corporations were these, multinational, and they'd make stuff. They'd make all of their chips in Taiwan, right? Like all of them. So what happens if there's a crisis? What happens if there's a tsunami? What happens if there's a pandemic? You can't make supply chains that brittle.
No, I agree.
So you gotta make stuff in America.
Now, I'm glad you brought up, the situation with President Obama and Clinton, because I think a big part of the anger that's out there is the fact that a lot of working people feel Democrats have left them behind. And part of what we're about to embark on the Working Class Heroes Tour is we're looking at going into areas that, working people feel like they've been abandoned, and talk to them and admit, look, the Clinton years, the Obama years, they weren't talking to working class people. But in this moment, we got a president right now who, like I said today, his statement today was, I care about working class people and middle class people because they're the ones who get hurt the most. There's somebody who cares right now about working people.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, I think Clinton and Obama were both good in about certain things on certain issues, but they really didn't get working class folks, and they didn't talk to them. They didn't spend time with them. In the same kind of way we're seeing now. The Democratic Party drifted away from its base. Democratic Party, from its beginning, has always been about working people. We were always supposed to be the party of workers. The party who fought the big finance guys on Wall Street, the party who fought the big banks, the party who looked out for workers, and we somewhere we lost sight of that, but I feel like now we're starting to get it back, and we're seeing the results. Manufacturing is coming back. Supply chains are being recreated here in America, and to see that start to happen is a really exciting thing.
Yeah, in fact, the jobs that were lost during the pandemic are all back, and they've created an additional 67,000 manufacturing jobs. So we're well above pre-pandemic levels. And that's, again, I believe it comes back to the policies that to be honest, a number of them still haven't been fully enacted yet. So as we go further down this road, this snowball only grows bigger, and bigger.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, the bill that's been in place the longest was the Recovery Act, and the Recovery Act, we're starting to see the results of that, and that really invested in, for example, the Republicans like to talk about funding the police. The Recovery Act actually funded the police, and it funded the firefighters, and it funded the first responders, and it funded teachers in schools, but it also gave cities the ability to start building things at the local level and doing local deals with small business, and that was passed a year and a half ago. But now the infrastructure bill got passed only a few months ago. We're just starting to see that spending, and that's going to produce not just road construction jobs, but that's going to produce manufacturing jobs.
Yep. And domestically, because of course in that we've got prevailing wage laws, we've got union language in there, and also this idea of buying American, domestic production, domestic consumption. You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Mike Lux, president of American Family Voices. You can check out their website, AmericanFamilyVoices.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can do that. And to that point, as this money goes out the door and we start seeing these projects, one of the things that Democrats do poorly, one of the things that Biden does poorly, and that I would argue Trump did masterfully, was take credit for things. Even things that he didn't do, still took credit for it. And
most of the things that he didn't do, yeah.
So it's my view, what we need to invest in are like giant 15-foot Biden statues with, pointing his finger, Biden did this. They had those idiotic stickers on gas pumps. Maybe we take that and we magnify it a gazillion times and go, yeah, this road you're driving on, hey, Joe Biden did this.
Yeah, absolutely. No, Democrats have to do a better job of selling what they did, because what they accomplished in this last couple of years of Congress with Biden's leadership has been phenomenal. I mean, we took on pharma and beat them. Nobody's beaten pharma in like 4 decades, like 5 decades. I mean, like, we beat pharma, for Christ's sake, and drug prices are going to go down as a result. We took on the whole climate thing, and it wasn't a woo-woo environmental thing. That climate bill is going to create 6 million new jobs. And like you say, there's going to be those jobs. A lot of those jobs, maybe even most of those jobs, are going to be union jobs because of the way the bill was written, and it was done that way intentionally.
Yeah,
it's the potential here is so great. This CHIPS Act, like industrial policy. Like I remember my friends at the UAW talking about industrial policy back in the 80s. Right, that we ought to be thinking about being strategic about which industries we ought to have building in America, and it's starting to happen, So I do think there's a long way to go. Like I said, that hole is pretty deep, but it's starting to happen. We're starting to see some change.
No, and that's a good thing. But my problem is we still have a corporate-controlled mainstream media that diminishes this stuff. While the headline glared, factory jobs are booming like it's the 70s, they went in, as you read the article, and diminished it. Oh, it's just craft breweries and ice cream makers. When the reality is we're talking about building battery plants for the electric vehicles of the future,
Absolutely.
Solar panels, the investments that are being touted and rolled out haven't come online yet, but they're coming, and it's because of this administration.
That's exactly right. I have a friend in the solar industry, and the day that the bill passed, the Inflation Reduction Act passed, they announced a new factory in West Virginia, 3,000 jobs, and he said they're going to be expanding their workforce to build solar panels here in America. They've been shut out because of China was doing it so cheaply. With the tax credits in that bill, we're going to be able to do that here in America, and you see that in industry after industry, in the electric car industry, in the chips industry, and all these different industries that we're going to see new jobs created in. It's really an exciting time, and it's exciting to see. I've been a Democrat my whole life, but Democrats have gotten a lot of stuff wrong. In these last 30, 40 years, we're starting to get things right. We're starting to make those investments that are gonna pay off with jobs.
Yep, it's what we most certainly need. It's the smart policy, the smart investments, things like the Inflation Reduction Act that's going to help us build solar panels and electric vehicles and do all of those things to help address climate change. Again, that haven't come online yet. These are things that I fear, and this is where I kind of want to end this up, Mike. I kind of fear that we're at a crossroads. While there are smart policies in place, while we're moving in a direction that I think is going to help us move back to that golden era of the American working class that had strong government investment and strong unionization for workers to share in the labor, in the wealth that their labor creates, one election can rip all that away because Republicans are running around going, "Hey, we take power, we're gutting all this stuff." Yeah,
that's exactly right, and it is scary. What they're talking about is scary, and it's not. I'm scared about the state of our democracy. I'm scared about voting rights. I'm scared about all those things, but I'm also scared about these economic policies because we're finally getting on the right track. We're finally investing in working people after a long drought, and to see that ripped away. They say, "Oh, we want to repeal, the Inflation Reduction Act." They want to repeal the bill that's going to create 6 million new jobs, right? They want to repeal the bill that's going to lower drug prices. That's to go backward. Would be such a terrible thing.
Yeah, well, these are the people, Mike, who ran out. We're going to repeal the Affordable Care Act and take insurance away from people who for years and decades never had it before. This is not new to them, Mike. Not new. This is why I'm hoping voters go to the polls in November and make sure that we don't go backwards. But Mike, I appreciate the time. Good stuff. I hope you'll come back and share some more thoughts, especially as we embark on our Working Class Heroes tour here in the month of October.
Rick, I'm so excited about that Working Class Heroes tour. It's going to be great. I'm looking forward to hearing the stories and seeing where you go and seeing what kinds of stuff you do while you're on the road. It'll be fun to watch.
Thanks so much, Mike. Appreciate the time. Good stuff. Mike Lux, president of the American Family Voices Group, AmericanFamilyVoices.org, the website. You can check out the work that they do there. We'll get links out on social media. Quick break, right back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2007. It was that morning that a bridge under construction in Vietnam collapsed. The disaster happened in Kinh Thao, about 100 miles south of Ho Chi Minh City. It was a suspension bridge project to cross the Hao River. The project was run by Japanese firms working with the Vietnamese government. 250 workers were on site at the project when the disaster happened. 55 people were killed and another 100 were injured due to the collapse. One reason cited for the collapse was that torrential downpours had caused the support structure for the bridge to sink. Another possible reason was that the scaffolding on the construction project was too weak to hold the weight. When it failed, it took down a section of the 4-lane concrete deck approach ramp with it. The fallen section weighed between 1,500 and 2,000 tons. The collapse was considered the worst disaster in the history of the Vietnamese construction industry. Man Hung, leader of one of the construction teams, described what occurred, saying, quote, "We suddenly heard a great explosion at a bridgehead. Dust covered a great airspace while workers screamed out. The scene was so terrible. The whole great block fell on people below. Vietnamese, along with Japanese and Filipino rescue volunteers, rushed to attempt to find survivors. 1,000 local residents gave blood at the hospital for those injured. The rescue efforts were hampered by the danger of a further collapse. They had to use a crane to clear the rubble. Finally, after 4 torturous days, the rescue efforts were called off. The bridge project was completed in 2010. The names of the fallen workers are inscribed on a memorial. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Got an email during the break from Bill. Bill says, I have a suggestion for a collapsed economy to include in your tour. He suggests Rockford, Illinois. He said there's a thriving economy before Ronald Reagan's term of office ended. He said that was the location for the high-end experimental mechanical engineering for NASA and the military. He said it all collapsed after Ronald Reagan left office. It was because Ronald Reagan cut the budget for NASA and many other programs which Rockford depended on to budget his Star Wars agenda. He said the city has never recovered. It is a faint shadow of what it used to be. And sadly, again, I keep coming back to this basic premise. Smart investment, sound policy. This is the stuff that built the most prosperous working class in history. This is what built that iconic era. And for so long, working people have gotten used to not getting the things that we need. That, well, the focus has gone on other things. And there have been a number of books written on this, to where this is not news. To what's the matter with Kansas, bowling alone. There's been a bunch of this stuff where people go, look, I'm not getting the economic stuff that I need. What are my next series of interests? And they've fed us the social stuff. They've force fed us the outrage. Where the outrage should really be is that people are working longer and harder for less. Less opportunities, less health care, less retirement security. We're heading towards a retirement security tsunami at some point in the very near future. My generation kind of screwed because there's no defined benefit pension for most working people at the end of their work careers. There is, oh, hey, this 401k defined contribution thing that you couldn't afford to put money in. Well, so sorry. This is where we've got to start talking about smart policies that's going to help working people. And I go back to, this administration doing some of that. The fact that during the Reagan era, we saw massive shifts in budgeting that picked winners and losers. Rockford, sadly, was one of the losers and have done nothing really to help. And I'm sorry to hear that, Bill. It's tragic. And I expect as we go out on the road and as we go into communities across the states that we're heading to, we're going to hear that story replicated time and time again. While the addresses may be different, the stories are going to be the same. The pride of what once was. That pride that we used to be this manufacturing center. This used to be the identity of the community. And then it was ripped away. Now, the narrative has been for so long, it was the unions. They got greedy. Those workers wanted too much. It's their fault. Blame the victims. Because it's what corporate America does very well. When the reality is it's been these folks at the top who just want more. And they chased around the globe the most exploitable labor, the most exploitable environmental regulations that they could get so that they could profit. And we've got to have that conversation and write the narrative. Because for too long, the right has been getting away with it's those greedy workers who want too much. And understand, when this recession hits, and it's going to, when the Fed gets its wish, and we suppress wages, they're going to blame working people for it. Already doing it. This is where we collectively have to stand together and say, no, we're not going to tolerate this. We're not going to put up with it. We're not going to let it happen. Not again. This isn't difficult. If we could just put down our divisions. If we could focus on the things that unite us as opposed to what tears us apart. And for me, it's always been the economy. You go back to James Carville's, it's the economy, stupid. It's always, how can I make sure that my kids get what they need? How can I make sure that there's a roof over their head and food in front of them on the dinner table? That's our focus as working people. But what the right's masterfully done is, they've created this environment where, don't worry about that. Let's talk about this stuff over here that doesn't affect your life at all. Who loves who does what with their body. Somehow that's the focus of our entire politics. Whereas I'm saying, what brought us together as a country was the fact that we shared in the wealth and the opportunity. And for so many, the struggle, the anger of the struggle, the lives that they were told were possible, that they were going to be able to lead, for many, hasn't happened. And then the distrust of the elites and the well-educated, which is why, Donald Trump loves the same. I love the poorly educated. Because they're distrustful of the elites, because look what they sold us. If we give the wealthy everything that they could possibly want, they'll take care of us. They're benevolent. They're good. When the reality is they're smart. They know what to do with money. Let's make more for themselves. At your expense. So for me, this election, pretty simple. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Never miss a moment. Share with your friends, coworkers, especially people that you might not agree with. Good stuff. Wherever you find your favorite podcasts, ours will be there. Simple.
Time for an intervention. We need to hold fossil fuel companies and their enablers to account.
UN Secretary General calls for fossil fuel industry to pay for climate damages.
I just want to say one word to you. Yes, sir. Plastics.
New initiative takes on plastics and the petrochemical industry. Plus,
if we want to beat China, pass the Kigali Treaty.
U.S. Senate approves the first climate treaty in decades.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
We have a rendezvous with climate disasters.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, it is Climate Week in New York City as the UN General Assembly meets. Are we finally going to solve this whole climate change thing this week?
Not this week.
Oh.
But I will say, as we go to air, Hurricane Fiona is barreling toward the island of Bermuda as a strong Category 4 hurricane.
Not good.
And in Puerto Rico, nearly 800,000 households still have no power or clean water after Hurricane Fiona wiped out the island's fragile electric grid, meaning no electricity to run water treatment systems or pump water into homes.
Meaning that's for more than 800,000 people. That's well over a couple million at this point.
Yep. And, as mentioned, it's the annual gathering of world leaders at the United Nations General Assembly in New York City this week. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres gave a somber assessment of global affairs in his opening address, saying the world is, quote, in great peril and gridlocked, unwilling to face the major challenges that threaten the future of humanity, like climate change, poverty, and war. Guterres cited the mounting toll of record-shattering extreme weather disasters that scientists say are supercharged by the burning of fossil fuels. He called for rich nations to end billion-dollar annual subsidies to the fossil fuel industry that are effectively subsidizing climate destruction and to claw back some of the industry's record profits from spiking energy prices thanks to Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Thanks, Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Polluters must pay. And today I'm calling on all developed economies to tax the windfall profits of fossil fuel companies. Those funds should be redirected in two ways: to countries suffering loss and damage caused by the climate crisis, and to people struggling with rising food and energy prices.
Wealthy nations have long resisted paying poorer countries for loss and damage from climate disasters and helping them to adapt to accelerating impacts.
Even though they're the ones who caused all of this trouble.
And that is going to be a major point of contention for the next UN Climate Summit in November in Egypt. A leaked document obtained by The Guardian this week shows that poorer countries intend to demand a new financial settlement, potentially with new taxes on fossil fuel use, to fund loss and damage payments and adaptation projects.
Good.
But some good news on that front. This week, Denmark became the first wealthy country in United Nations history to pledge compensation to the developing world for the consequences of fossil fuel use.
Also good.
Denmark pledged to pay more than $13 million to support countries hard hit by extreme weather disasters.
Well, that's not much money.
No, it's not. In other news, in a new report, the Government Accountability Office warns the federal government faces rising fiscal exposure from increasingly costly extreme weather disasters, and that government-wide action is needed to limit the financial risks. The GAO recommends agencies incorporate climate resilience into their infrastructure and planning, and Congress and agencies should develop a clear strategic national plan to guide national climate adaptation efforts.
Oh, I'm sure they will.
And some more good news. Billionaire former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg announced that he is taking on the plastics industry with an $85 million campaign aimed at blocking the petrochemical industry's push to increase production of plastics that are made from fossil fuels.
Well, now that he's gotten rid of all the guns and solved global warming, I'm sure his plastics campaign will be gangbusters.
The Beyond Petrochemicals initiative seeks to block more than 120 proposed petrochemical projects in the United States and will bolster local environmental justice groups. And finally, some very good news.
I'll be the judge of that.
On Wednesday, the U.S. Senate finally joined the rest of the world in ratifying the Kigali Amendment to the 1987 Montreal Protocol, the first global climate treaty that saved the ozone layer, which protects all life on Earth. The Kigali Amendment phases out the use of climate-warming hydrofluorocarbons, or HFCs. Those are newer chemical superpollutants used in refrigeration and air conditioning. U.S. companies backed it now that they hold patents on the products that the world will need to replace them. And that attracted just enough Republican votes to pass.
Okay. That is very good news. For much more on that and all of the other stories we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So looking forward to Wednesday. Yes, another episode of the January 6th committee hearings. I think what is it, 7, 8? They're billing this as potentially the final episode, and I'm like, this kind of could be like the Who, their final farewell tour that I went to back in '89 and have seen the farewell tour. I don't know. I just took my son to see the Who not too long ago. Fortunately, they didn't bill it as a farewell tour, just kind of, the next bit. I guess they've given up on that. But the good thing is maybe we're going to get some more information. They're going to be using some clips from Roger Stone's movie that where he's saying, look, there's going to be violence, that we're going to have, armed people there, and, basically laying out months before January 6th what actually happened. Kind of premeditated thinking stuff. But here to share some thoughts on Wednesday's January 6th hearing, I've asked Peter Montgomery to come talk with us. Peter is a senior fellow over at People for the American Way. They run the Right Wing Watch group, rightwingwatch.org, the website if you want to check out the incredible work that they do. Peter, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks to be here. Best miniseries since Game of Thrones.
So what are we looking forward to? I mean, is this this is where we kind of wrap it all together? Is just another piece, another brick in the wall? What are we looking for?
I think the fact that this might be the last hearing before they actually, stop and work on putting together their final written report means that they're just going to really they're going to make the case. I think he laid out, they're going to just try to make the case again. I mean, they've already made it. They're just going to make the case again, just how bad this was, that this was a criminal conspiracy that involved Trump, that involved Trump's lawyers, campaign people, allies, all conspiring to overturn the election, whatever way they could. And, this committee has generated so much information, just, hundreds of thousands of emails and texts and documents. It's really been an extraordinary amount of work. And this is their chance, I think, to, put the case to the public one more time in the most compelling way they can.
No, I'm looking forward to the possibilities of there being some accountability in all this. And this is where, all these hearings, aside, eventually there has to be some accountability, because what happened on January 6th can never happen again. And I want those people who plotted, planned, schemed, and carried this out, I want them held accountable. Even if that rises to the, I know everyone wants Trump to be in the orange suit picking up trash on the side of the road, but I want to make sure that people are held accountable.
Well, that's absolutely right. If people aren't held accountable, it's going to happen again. People have said historically, an unsuccessful coup, if the people are not held accountable, is just a practice run. They'll try it again. And we know in some ways they're already planning to try again. Trump and Bannon have their minions running for Secretary of State. They're running for office as local election officials. So they'll have their people in place to try to pull off the shenanigans that they tried to force election officials to do this last time. So that's really troubling. Yeah, but truth telling is the first step to accountability. And the only, we'd never even have a chance at accountability if Republicans, held the House right now. If they had been able to block the creation of this investigative committee, they would have buried the truth about what happened so deep that we'd never find it. So this has really been an amazing public service to unearth all this and show it to us, to show it to the public.
And that's, again, why I think this election is so important as well, because, if this election, if Republicans take the House, this all gets swept under the rug.
They've made that very clear. They're going to shut down any investigation of Trump. They're going to shut down an investigation of January 6th, and they'll use their power to harass the Biden administration and to go after, to try to make, Americans care about Hunter's laptop.
Because there are, like a whole series of laptops out there, as I understand. In fact, ones that he may never even touched.
Well, they've made it clear that they really will stop any effort to hold Trump accountable. They'll stop any effort to get more of the truth out to the American public. I think that's why, the committee has been working so hard, because they know that they've got to tell us what they have to tell us by the end of the year. Because if Republicans take the House, we're not going to learn any more from them. And so I think there's going to be a blockbuster written report that this committee is going to put out, probably very close to the end of the year, just massively documenting everything that they have told us at the public hearings, and way more that they just haven't. There's just no time to tell in a public hearing. It's going to be something extraordinary, I think.
So, what do you say to the people, Peter, who go, this close to the election, this shouldn't be going on now because this is just purely political at this point? What's the argument there?
Well, the argument is we almost had our election overthrown. We almost had our democracy upended. And we need to know the truth about that. And we need to know the truth. I'd say it's even more important to know the truth before the elections, because, as you said, it makes the stakes very clear. It makes the stakes of, we have one party that, with very few exceptions, is in lockstep with Trump, is in lockstep against accountability, is trying to downplay the importance of what happened, trying to make people forget what they saw with their own eyes. This mob attacking Capitol Police, dragging on the steps, stabbing them with flagpoles, beating them, bashing the windows in, trashing the Capitol. We all saw it, and yet they're trying to downplay it, pretend it wasn't happening. These were just, peaceful protesters. They really don't want the truth to come out. And so I think, the fact that it's close to the election is great. Unfortunately, a lot of the Trump and MAGA supporters aren't going to watch because they don't want to know. They don't want to know the truth. They're like the la, 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 la. But a lot of people are. A lot of Americans have watched the hearings. And I think, there's some evidence that there's a good chunk of independents who take the insurrection more seriously because of what the hearings have shown us. And I think the combination of the hearings and the investigations in New York and the FBI, we've seen Trump's numbers slipping down, and the number of people who want him to run again slipping down. And so I think this is all having an impact. And it's not, unfortunately, there hasn't been a huge group of Trump people seeing the scales fall from their eyes with the hearings. But I do think that this sort of steady presentation of the truth, of the really disturbing truth, is having an impact.
Yeah, no, I think you'd agree with me that, all of these investigations are just, highlighting all of the criming that went on during his tenure. But, some of my MAGA friends, some of my Trump supporter friends are going, this is just piling on. This is just all political. It's a witch hunt, Peter. It's all a witch hunt. It's all just going after poor Donald. But the reality is you look at what's going on in Georgia, you look what's going on in New York, you look at this, this January 6th committee. There's just so much that I don't know how you can just ignore what is so much.
Yeah, I mean, that's really when you have to look at this as a cult of personality, right? I mean, this is why charismatic con men are dangerous, because they're con men. They're great at manipulating people. at getting people to believe them. When you add to that this right-wing movement that has spent years telling people, don't trust the media, don't trust the mainstream media, only trust Fox News, only trust conservative media outlets. So they've created this bubble, and Trump is really great at playing on that, and getting people to believe he's their guy, he's in their corner. And unfortunately, that means a lot of them are willing to accept whatever he does, and that's dangerous. It's dangerous for democracy. And I think, it's why, as much as I disagree with their politics, I say that we really owe a debt of gratitude to Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, because they have stood up against Trump. They have said democracy is more important than the power of the Republican Party, and they've sacrificed their own careers because the Republican Party's base is so loyal to Trump that they've had to sacrifice their careers to stand with the truth. And so I think that's been a real sign of political courage.
Yeah, and what does that say about the Republican Party? That's the other part of this. You listen to the Rick Smith Show, we're here with Peter Montgomery, senior fellow at People for the American Way. Check out their website, people4.org, I believe, right?
Yes, and rightwingwatch.org. Yep.
We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Now, I understand Robin Vos, the Speaker of the Wisconsin House, was subpoenaed, supposed to testify today, 10 a.m., filed a lawsuit. That didn't happen. It's remarkable to me that, if I'm called to testify, my butt's going to be in that chair. But we get so many of these people who, subpoenas don't seem to mean the same thing to, folks in the higher rarefied era that they mean to us common folk. I think someone like Voss should have to testify about his phone call with Trump back in July. We need to know if our president's a crook or not. I think that's simple.
Well, absolutely. And it's a sign of just how much he has poisoned the party, because all these people, I'm sure if you go to their websites, listen to campaigns, they all run as, law and order, rule of law guys. But then, when law and order comes knocking at their door, they slam it shut. They run away. They don't, these are legal subpoenas. These are things that they are legally required to respond to. And, they blow them off.
Yeah, isn't it amazing, to your point right there, isn't it amazing that the law and order people are the ones who are now saying we need to defund the FBI and all right. of all of that stuff? And I'm going, did I wake up from a dream and the narrative flipped? When did that happen?
It happened when they decided to put Trump over everything else. And they got convinced that all the investigations of Trump were fake news and politics. And they believed what Trump started railing about, his enemies in the deep state. There's just been a relentless propaganda campaign from the right to tell people that poor Trump is the victim of all these bad people who are out to get him, including the people in the FBI and the Justice Department. But you're absolutely right. It's stunning to see all these law and order people who, back the blue, who are siding with the insurrectionists, who sent 140 members of the Capitol Police to the hospital, or who injured that many of them, who are now siding with people who are just defying the law and refusing legal subpoenas. Bannon got held in criminal contempt. I'm hoping that others who are defying subpoenas are going to face the same thing.
I'm hoping they build a special wing off of one of the more moderate jails. These aren't people who can do real time, but take them off the golf courses. Give them orange suits, let them pick up trash on the side of the highway. Make them a little bit useful. So last question I've got for you. The hearing Wednesday, what are we told is the focus, and what should we be paying attention to?
I think they've been a little bit mum. So, sometimes they've made it very clear in advance who's going to be testifying and who the focus is. They've kept this one a little closer to the vest, but I think I would say look for new insider information. The last couple hearings, the big bombshells have been people from inside the administration who've come forward with new truth. So I'm guessing there's going to be some more truth from inside the White House, from inside of Team Trump. There have been some more, they've gotten their hands on more documents. And I think I would look to, let's hear what the committee's going to say about criminal referrals. The committee can't charge people, but they can make criminal referrals to the Justice Department. And I am fully expecting them to make a lot of criminal referrals to the Justice Department. And hopefully they'll talk about that some.
I know I will have my bowl of popcorn and be ready for Wednesday, hoping for those criminal referrals and waiting for that element of surprise. I'm waiting for one of the inner circle to be the Exhibit A witness, surprise witness, maybe Ivanka. Who knows?
That would be some news.
That would be fun. But Peter, I appreciate the time. As always, appreciate the expertise and the insight. Good stuff, man.
Thanks for what you do.
I appreciate it. Our good friend Peter Montgomery. Make sure you check out their website, rightwingwatch.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I am most certainly looking forward to Wednesday. Going to be an interesting set of interesting hearing, and I'm waiting for the bombshell. How do they put the bow on this? How do they wrap this all up? That's going to be the moment, because I think we're in kind of an interesting time. We're heading into an election where Republicans are telling us what they're going to do. It's all going to be about Hunter Biden's laptop, and I get this every day from conservatives who are yelling, "What about Hunter Biden?" I go, I don't care about Hunter Biden, unless you can prove to me that there's a direct correlation between what Hunter Biden put in his pocket, because he was able to use the name, which has been going on for forever, on both sides of the aisle. And look, if you want me to join on the idea of, hey, let's stop this kind of nepotism and let's stop this kind of coattail profiteering, I'm with you. I'm on board. If we're going to go after Hunter Biden, though, we got to go after Ivanka and Jared. Jared got $2 billion from the Saudis, and I don't think enough people are asking questions about that. You go, how did he get $2 billion? Especially when the Saudi folks are saying this is a bad investment, a bad idea, don't do it. And the prince goes, no, we're going to do it. Kind of like hush money, kind of like payoff money, seemed like. We haven't done anything on that front. And shame on the Democrats for not doing that. But again, they don't want to look like they're doing something political. This is the problem with my Democratic friends. Whereas Republicans, they don't care. They're going to follow every bit of insanity to their ideological aims, factual or not. We spent years hearing about Benghazi. We spent millions of dollars chasing that down a rabbit hole in the hopes of being able to pin it on Hillary Clinton. When the reality is a big part of it was Republicans, holding the country hostage on the funding front. But don't talk about that. It's bad. We're in an interesting moment, and I'm hoping by having these hearings, you lay it out in front of us. Say this is what happened. Video evidence. Every person that's testified has been someone in the Trump sphere. The very best people. The smartest people. The people with the best words. And when those best words come out, not very good for the former guy. So I'm going to be interested to see who they trot out. If you're Trump, you got to be wondering, who's going to turn on him next. Because that's what's going on. He's got to worry about what's going on in New York, who's going to turn on him there. Somebody turned on him down in Mar-a-Lago. Probably was the Secret Service, I would guess. But may have been somebody else. So if you're him, are you looking over your shoulder every second of the day? Which is why I love that photograph of him standing out on the golf course with a bunch of people and them having a meeting. Kind of like The Sopranos. Call me on the payphone down the block. I'm going to go to the strip club and go to the payphone outside. Meet me there. It is what it is. Anyway, some interesting news coming out of Russia. Putin has granted Edward Snowden citizenship, and I've got a bunch of this as well. What do you think of Edward Snowden? I don't care. I let him go to Russia. That was always the plan anyway. He was a spy, in my view, is what it is. Good. Congratulations. Also, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo congratulating the new right-wing leader of the Italian government. This is where you go, globally, are you concerned? We see fascism on the rise here in this country with, we've got a candidate in my state of Pennsylvania who I'm going to say it right out, straight up fascist, this Doug Mastriano, and I think he would probably agree. But we're seeing globally this rise of right-wing extremism, and now you've got the most right-wing government coming into power in Italy since Mussolini. Kind of got the globe on edge. I mean, the White House is kind of we're going to work with everybody and we're going to move forward and all that stuff, and kind of makes you wonder, are we going to, especially when what's going on with Russia and Ukraine? And I look here at home. We've got people who don't believe in democracy, don't believe in the rule of law, potentially becoming the people who are going to be the overseers of that law. And I look at this candidate for Secretary of State in Arizona, who for years failed to follow failed to follow the rules of reporting business income and business ties and all the things that you're supposed to do on these official documents. He's running to be the guy who oversees everybody else doing that. It's kind of a scary world we're heading towards, where elections, might not matter anymore. They may be, predetermined before you get to cast the first ballot. Scary stuff, my friends. Scary stuff. Gonna take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people of the dawn.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2007.
It was that morning that a bridge under construction in Vietnam collapsed. The disaster happened in Kinh Thao, about 100 miles south of Ho Chi Minh City. It was a suspension bridge project to cross the Hao River. The project was run by Japanese firms working with the Vietnamese government. 250 workers were on site at the project when the disaster happened. 55 people were killed and another 100 were injured due to the collapse. One reason cited for the collapse was that torrential downpours had caused the support structure for the bridge to sink. Another possible reason was that the scaffolding on the construction project was too weak to hold the weight. When it failed, it took down a section of the 4-lane concrete deck approach ramp with it. The fallen section weighed between 1,500 and 2,000 tons. The collapse was considered the worst disaster in the history of the Vietnamese construction industry. Man Hung, leader of one of the construction teams, described what occurred, saying, quote, "We suddenly heard a great explosion at a bridgehead. Dust covered a great airspace while workers screamed out. The scene was so terrible. The whole great block fell on people below. Vietnamese, along with Japanese and Filipino rescue volunteers, rushed to attempt to find survivors. 1,000 local residents gave blood at the hospital for those injured. The rescue efforts were hampered by the danger of a further collapse. They had to use a crane to clear the rubble. Finally, after 4 torturous days, the rescue efforts were called off. The bridge project was completed in 2010. The names of the fallen workers are inscribed on a memorial."
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Let me say one word to you, nuts. Now, let me say one name to you, Ted Cruz. They've become synonymous with the Texas lawmaker perennially topping national lists of goofy right-wing political goobers. Only, Ted can't rightly be called a lawmaker, for he's not a serious participant in that process, instead devoting his senatorship to political stunts and picking silly PR fights with a growing list of enemies. Running out of people to attack, Ted has found another species for his vitriol, fictional icons. He's been padding his right-wing credentials by going after Mr. Potato Head, Mickey, and Pluto, and, believe it or not, Muppets. This U.S. Senator has dedicated the power and public resources of his office to demonize popular creatures on Sesame Street, specifically Big Bird and lovable little Elmo. Ted rants he has proof that Muppets are covert tools of, quote, government propaganda. So this ridiculous excuse of a senator is saving America from Muppets. But for a whole bag of assorted nuttiness, you can't beat Senator Rick Scott's 11-point plan to rescue America. A disgraced former healthcare mogul, this mega-millionaire reinvented himself as a wingnut Florida senator, and he now chairs a policy arm of the Republican Party. In February, he set forth a stunning agenda of far-out right-wing extremism that he says his party will push if they retake the Senate this November, including 1. Implementing new federal taxes on the poorest half of Americans. 2. Terminating Social Security and Medicare. 3. Completing Donald Trump's folly of a border wall. This is Jim Hightower saying, fiddle-faddlers like Cruz and Scott have turned the once proud U.S. Senate into the little nut shop on the Hill.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So one of the things that I find really interesting in this moment, and again, I've gotten a couple of emails from folks going, no, the Biden administration's causing all this inflation, all this spending. It's causing the inflation. You're making things worse. The Inflation Reduction Act is making things worse. And I've had this from a bunch of people because this is what the mainstream corporate-controlled media keeps feeding us, that somehow spending that hasn't hit yet, spending that hasn't happened yet, somehow, that's what's causing our inflation. That's what's causing our problems. And, this is one of those moments where I go, we really do need to be talking about, good information and good news and all of those things that will move us in a direction that, maybe we can help fight back against. Maybe, just kind of maybe we can get good information and good news. Because for too long, and I've been saying this for the longest time, for too long we've been allowing our corporate media just to lie to us. And, I'm going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk with Kate Bissett about this program that they're working on that hopefully will get us some good information and help get us some good content and rebuild local news in a way that, well, maybe we have the ability to help fight back. So I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, going to have Kate Bissett from Courier Newsroom here to share some thoughts on just how do we get some good information. Back after this.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So much of what we see, hear, read, owned by corporate special interests, the corporate-controlled media, and we're told that there's this liberal-conservative divide, even though I would argue our corporate-controlled media, well, very conservative, pushing that message of division, pushing that message of government is bad, corporation's good, so that corporate control can rule the day. And we get so much disinformation. We get so much, what we used to call BS back in the day. But today we got a nice word. It's called disinformation, misinformation. How do we filter through it all? Well, I've got my next guest going to help us figure out how we work through, how we filter the garbage and come up with good information. That's why I've asked Kate Bissett to come talk with us. She's the content organizing director over at Courier Newsroom, couriernewsroom.com, the website. They've got a new program coming out I'm very excited about. Kate, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So we see this a lot. I mean, there's a lot of, what I used to call back in the old days, when I was not on FCC, radio, bull. It's just bull. Yeah.
I do.
How do we detect the giant steaming smelly pile of bull?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and I think it's one that obviously the fate of democracy at this point is starting to hang on as we see more and more pushes of disinformation and less local news available to cut through for communities. I can tell you, Rick, that for 20 years I was a community journalist in northern Michigan. And so I know that as we've lost, more than 1,500 papers across the country in the last decade, and so many more have been consolidated in conglomerates, we've lost that local voice that was kind of the bull detector, right? Because we were able to have journalists who lived in the communities where they were reporting, connecting the dots between policies and policymakers and everyday life and impact at a hyperlocal and a state level that was able to keep civil discourse, keep civic engagement going. And without that, we've made this vacuum of space for really bad actors to come in and take advantage of people that maybe don't have as much local news availability, that might not ever pay a paywall, because those media outlets that do still exist, that are trying hard to bring journalistic integrity or keep journalistic integrity in their communities, are often behind a paywall. And most Americans, frankly, aren't paying for news that way. So at Courier Newsroom, we're doing a couple of really interesting and exciting things. One, we're a social first network, which means we're meeting people where the disinformation lives most, which is online and in social media spaces. And we have 8 newsrooms across the country with journalists who live and work and are in community in their states. So they have a real invested interest in seeing impact and personal humanized stories being told to help reconnect those dots.
Right.
But we have to do more than just like share good information and assume, I think back in the day, journalists would say, if you tell a relevant story and you tell it well, your readers will find you, right? That's how I always existed. It was kind of our hubris, frankly, that I think partly got us into this mess. Because we know that that's not the way algorithms work.
Not in this day and age. And
that's
look,
right.
And look, the internet has done this. The costs have done this, and you brought up the costs. When I was a kid, the newspaper were, and I'm going to sound really old, but it was like a quarter. And
Totally.
most people picked it up. Now you go, it's a real investment in getting the newspaper, especially if delivered to your home. My first job as an 8-year-old was delivering the Cleveland Press in the evenings. And everybody got it, even in poor neighborhoods, because that's how you got your information. And it was tested. It was made to be somewhat accurate. Now people are getting stuff from who knows where. Joe in his basement's making a site that looks somewhat decent, throwing out, giant steaming piles of nonsense. And that somehow is passing off as news. And look what it's doing to us.
That's right. You are exactly right. It was the same thing where I grew up. Everybody got the evening paper. People were able to turn on their trusted radio stations, right? Even that, or their news, and you'd get Walter Cronkite. You'd get the news. It wasn't this like divided, hyper-partisan situation where there are like bad actors and extremists that are masking themselves as news now, looking to create wedges and distrust in all of our institutions, right? We see it in schools, we see it in health, we see it in government, we see it at like hyper-local levels, at state levels, and at federal levels. So one of the ways that we're trying to fight back against this is to build a grassroots movement of good info messengers, people that we can train to learn how to use their social media platforms and empower them to take advantage of the power that we all still do have to share that good information out into the world. So what that looks like for us is, providing trainings and kind of continuing education for folks on how to spot disinfo. That's important. Connecting people with organizations that are working to debunk disinfo. But then for our sort of sweet spot, we're also training people how to go on the offense, because this is the one thing that we have seen a hole in this disinformation war. There's lots of really great people out there doing work to debunk things as they happen. But there's not a big concerted effort yet on sharing and blanketing these spaces with good information, right? This is what, there are certain bad actors that are, I don't even like to say their names, that have made a real industry for themselves in disinformation. Yeah. And they will say, it doesn't matter if it's true, you just have to flood the space.
No, and this is where, if it gets repeated enough, it actually becomes then true.
That's
and
right.
This is the problem with the algorithms, as you've pointed out, because I can't tell you how many people have come to me and said, I read this on the internet, and go, well, of course, if you read it on the internet, it's got to be true.
Must be true.
And the reality is it's not.
It's not. And part of the problem is that the stuff that's getting spread and shared and reacted to in a way that the algorithms will pick it up is that disinformation. And we know, particularly for folks who are only getting their news on social media, who are not like actively going to pay a paywall or not actively seeking that information out, if that's all they see, it starts to, exactly like what you said, it starts to become true in their brains, even if that's not what they thought before they were seeing it over and over and over again. So we want to train people to reclaim that power of being a trusted messenger in their community, take on that role that their local newspapers used to play in being able to provide that constant visual for people of things that are true and relevant and factual and important in connecting the dots for folks, reminding people like, what actually happens with a local policy that, impacts them as a person, why they should care about civic engagement in general, and doing that through news content. So we're training folks on how to share that information, how to have those conversations online, how to work within the algorithm system to do everything we can to lift up news content, both, our newsroom content in our 8 states, and also the content of mission-aligned organizations who are in those communities doing really important work day in and day out that might not have the bandwidth or the capacity or the resources to get their message out online as well.
You listen to The Rick Smith Show with Kate Bissett. She's the content organizing director at Courier Newsroom. Check out their website, couriernewsroom.com, and you can find all of the 8 local newsrooms right there at Courier Newsroom. I know where I'm at. You've got the Keystone part of it right here. I know there are a number of states. They've got one in Wisconsin that we're going to be talking with folks there as well. All across the country there are places. But here's the thing, Kate, and understand, and I think the hard part of what you're talking about is this is hard work. It's easy to make stuff up. It's easy to create a bunch of BS. It's hard to be factual. It's hard to be accurate. And, this is why, local journalism has struggled because the money hasn't been there. You've had these big, hedge funds and these big moneyed interests who've come in and just devastated local newspapers for their own profit. All of this stuff has just been kind of the perfect storm of the end of democracy. How much are we talking about in the way of a heavy lift for the average person to do what you're asking? Because it sounds to me like this could be a lot of work.
Well, the good news is a couple of things. It's a lot of work on the back end, right? It's a lot of work building the infrastructure. It's a lot of work for our journalists to go out and tell the stories that matter to people and that will resonate with people and that drive that local connection forward. But for our volunteers, we're making it as light of a load as possible and really believing that it's the community weaving together that's going to make the lift light. So one person can go in and do less than 5 minutes of work in a week on their social media platforms by sharing relevant content, by interacting with news that in a way that we know will lift it up in people's news feeds through the algorithms, by inviting other people into this sphere, by thinking about and learning and sharing what they're hearing. It's less than 5 minutes, but it could make all the difference in the world, because if we get enough folks to jump in and get on board with fighting disinfo proactively as good info messengers, we really think that this is going to shift the tide. This is the old school paperboy mentality of knocking on everyone's door with the evening news, but doing it for today's times and understanding that one paper person used to deliver a whole route, and that was enough. That doesn't work anymore in social media. If we were talking about one person per community or 10 people in a state trying to lift up this news, that would be way too heavy of a lift. But if we're talking about thousands of people coming together, trusted messengers in their own communities, sharing this information, and working alongside us to push good info to the forefront, and try and flood the space that way, we think that we can make a real difference, and we think we can do it in a really light lift for folks.
So I'm sold. How do we get involved? How does someone jump into this? What's the path forward?
I love that question. Thank you. My organizing heart is happy to hear it. So you can go to Courier Newsroom and you can click that bright yellow Take Action button, and it will take you to a page for Good Info Messengers. You can sign up. We will have organizers. We have organizers in every state on the ground pulling these communities together. They can get you set up in a training. We have multiple different communication channels that we work with our volunteers on Slack and Facebook groups, in WhatsApp, in email, one-on-one for people who are less comfortable and want to learn more about having to have those conversations and have the time and energy to do that. So all you have to do is take that first step, and then we take it from there.
Because I look at the kind of organizing that my MAGA friends have done, and the right has done for decades now. You talk to somebody who's, a quote unquote conservative or Republican, they've got their message down. They're all reading from the same hymnal, and a lot of it is, focus group tested, think tank approved messaging that, may not be accurate and may not be even good for them, but it sounds good. This is a way maybe to start pushing back on some of that and maybe do a little bit of educating. Is that the goal here, or is it more?
Exactly. It's that and more, right? We want to make sure that we are educating folks on best practices and really developing and working with our newsrooms to make sure that the content that they are creating, this news that they are bringing to their communities is reaching people in a way that's meaningful and relevant in their lives. And also, we want to start to reconnect those dots for people about civic engagement. And I think that the first step to that is having good information. I know, and I have seen, because I spent 20 years as a community journalist, I could see the difference when people had information that they needed about issues that were happening in their community. And that could be a microcosm of an issue that's happening across the country or across the state. When they have information and they know who to talk to about their concerns, their hopes, their opportunities, you can put those two things together and all of a sudden change starts to happen in a community because people feel empowered. And this is the other thing that disinformation does, right? It suppresses people's ability or interest in being empowered to make a difference because it all feels overwhelming. It all feels bad. It all feels like our institutions are falling apart. So by sharing good info, by sharing quality content that connects the dots for people and builds community within that group of good info messengers, we really want to create a space where healthy democracy and healthy dialogue can thrive again.
No, that I'm sold. Sounds great to me. And being able to come together and talk about things. Part of the reason that we're going to be starting this road tour is I believe there are things that unite us. I believe there are things that, as a country, that we should be able to agree on, and we're told that we can't. If you bought the red hat or the blue hat, you've got to be on your polar opposite sides, and you're not allowed to ever talk to each other. And I think most of us are somewhere between the lines.
I think you're totally right. And this is another thing that Courier does that I love and am such a firm believer in. A lot of our newsrooms work very, very hard to bring in a lot of place-based lifestyle content to create community. So we're not just always talking about issues. We're not just always talking about government or impact. We're talking about the things that connect us. So every state has its thing, right? Every state has its favorite foods, its history, its culture, its places that people love to visit. They have families looking for things to do with their kids. They have groups of people who are like in Michigan, Faygo is a big thing for us. Like there is a lot of debate about what the best Faygo flavor is. We know that kind of conversation builds community, right? It's like there are things everywhere that we can bring people together. And once we do that and we start to build trust in that way, then we can start to have the harder conversations too.
So I guess the question I have then, are you a juggalo?
I am not a juggalo.
Because I heard Faygo, and that immediately my mind goes.
Yep.
Sorry, I know
it's great. Nope, it's okay. I could fib and say yes, but I am not a fan of disinformation, so I will own the no.
Perfect. So where can I go again? Where can I send folks? Where do I go? What do we do?
CourierNewsroom.com. You can go and you click that. I think it's in the right-hand corner. It's a bright yellow button. You cannot miss it. It says take action. You can immediately be taken to that Good Info Messengers page. Sign up, and our organizers will be in touch, and we'll get going together because it's going to take all of us to fight disinformation.
That is the message. Good stuff. Kate, I appreciate you taking time for us. I look forward to coming back and telling us how this program is going, how we're changing the world and making it a better place to be and live.
Yes, can't wait to follow along with the roadshow too. Thanks, Rick.
Thanks so much, Kate Bizzett. She is the content organizing director there at Courier Newsroom. Make sure you check out the website, couriernewsroom.com. We'll get links out on social media how you can check it out. Maybe join up. Suggested join up, fight the disinformation. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. You miss any portion of the program, podcast, make sure you grab it wherever you find yours. You'll find ours. Quick break, right back. tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So I want to finish up with an email from Diane. She said, heard your interview with AFT President Randy Weingarten on Banned Book Week and thought you'd be interested in this story from my school district. Yes, my district is run by crazy people. And she attached an article by the Guardian from the Central York School District, not too far from where I'm at. Where they have, I guess they banned these coding books that I've not seen, but they're evidently they're girls in coding. The titles are The Friendship Code, Team BFF, Race to the Finish, Lights, Music, Code, Spotlight on Coding Club, and as it was explained to me. These books are about girls learning STEM, learning coding. That's it. This is what's objectionable. And this is kind of the thing where you go, why would this be banned? Why is this something that would be objectionable? These are stories that teach kids how to do coding. This is stuff that, we should be kind of encouraging, maybe a little bit. And my fear is this is where the Luddite crowd, the quotum and totem crowd, the folks who really take the magic thinking to the extreme. This is where it comes down to affecting the rest of us. This is where extreme religiosity, this extremism, this is where it meets policy. Now we can argue over, some things like, from what I understand, Mein Kampf is still on the shelves there in the Central York School District, but girls learning how to code, that's a bridge too far. And the question that my mind goes back to is, to what aim? Is this more about control? Is this more about, that's not for you? Pi, learn about pi. What kind of a future are we creating when this is where we go? We're in crazy times. This is one of those things where I look back to the years past, and you see these images of our grandparents and great grandparents doing things that are just deplorable. I think back to the giant fires of when John Lennon said something along the lines of they're more popular than Jesus at this moment, because with young people they were, and all of a sudden you got a bunch of crazy religious people burning Beatle albums, and you go, how ridiculous is that? This is the same kind of stuff. Because now I got to go. Do I have to go read Girls Who Code to find out what the big deal is? And now do I got to go buy these just as a matter of, protest? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If there's something objectionable in these books, I think I got to know. I think I now need to know what it is about these coding books that are so objectionable to our friends in the Central York School District, and all the books that the banned fetish folks are on right now. I'd love to hear that. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you download the podcast wherever you get your favorite podcasts, from iTunes to iHeart, Stitcher to Podbean, everywhere in between. Ours will be there. And if it's not, make sure you tell me, and we'll make sure it gets there. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.